Hi everyone, this is Carly from Craig Systems. I just wanted to thank you for joining us for our first Security Basics Lunch and Learn. At Craig Systems, we provide tailored voice, data, and security solutions to meet your business needs today and well into the future. We've seen firsthand how cyber attacks can disrupt business operations. So we've put together this short, ongoing webinar series to educate our clients because the more you know about digital security, the better you can protect your company, your customers, and your data. Each week, we'll introduce a new topic and dive into the basics. We're joined by Shanna Utgard, Success Manager at Defendify, our strategic cybersecurity partner. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to you, Shanna.
Thank you, Carly, and welcome everybody. Appreciate you taking a little bit of time out of your lunch break and feeding your mind as well as your bodies with us today on the first of our Lunch and Learn series. As Carly mentioned, I am Shanna Utgard. I'm the Success Manager at Defendify, and Craig Systems is one of our preferred partners. Today, in this introductory session, we are going to kind of talk about the W's of cybersecurity. So I threw a few questions up here. Who needs to worry about cybersecurity? Why antivirus and firewalls aren't enough? Are you actually a target? There's no W in there, but how are the bad actors coming after your business, and what types of data needs to be protected? And as we also mentioned, I am from Defendify, Craig Security's strategic cybersecurity partner. We have the first all-in-one cybersecurity platform for small business. You can see some of the awards that we have been winning left and right down there. And we work with our partners such as Craig Systems to help smaller businesses who used to think that cybersecurity was either way too complicated or way too expensive. And it's our mission to prove that wrong and keep everything as simple as possible. We believe in straight talk and not tech talk. So that is who we are. We're based up here in Portland, Maine, and we're having a bit of a heat wave this week, as I'm sure the rest of the country is. So it's a funny story. We're going to start off with a little story here before we get into the nitty-gritty. In a past life, I actually didn't work in cybersecurity. I was a real estate paralegal. So I worked for a law office. And one of the things about cybersecurity is everybody always thinks that an attack or a breach or something is going to happen to the other guy and everybody else. Well, I ended up finding out that everybody else thinks the same thing too. And I was a real estate paralegal, and I was doing a closing that was a mail away on the seller's side of the transaction. So I prepared the entire closing package. I emailed it off to the seller. She printed out all of the documents, signed and had them notarized. A lot of our communication went back and forth through email. It was a very large transaction. The proceeds of that sale ended up being about $2.1 million. And the seller had provided me with some Chase wiring instructions for her proceeds. And a lot of her emails would come as either a direct email or a forward from her real estate broker. So our communication went back and forth for weeks and weeks and weeks over this transaction. She had a very distinct style about her writing. She even signed all of her emails with a nickname. So she executed all of the closing documents and sent them all back to me. I got them. The buyer side of the transaction came into our law office and signed all of their paperwork. And I was making all of the copies of the executed documents and everything to send back to her out of the completed closing package. And I got an email from her that said, hey, I was just talking with my husband and we decided that we wanted to have our proceeds wired to our Bank of America account instead of our Chase account. Here's the updated wiring information. So I thought, no problem. I had known about the specific details of how, she had owned the house in her name. We had gone back and forth about whether or not we needed her husband to sign off on it, even though she was the only one that owned it. And she signed the email with her nickname. So I didn't think anything of it, and I changed the wiring instructions and sent them off to my finance team, and they sent the wire out. I was filling out my FedEx form to send the documents back to her through the mail because I had emailed the original ones, and I went to type in her zip code and it pulled up a different city than the one that I was expecting to see. So I picked up the phone and I gave her a call and I said, hey, I'm doing your FedEx label, and when I type in your zip code, it pulls up this town. Is it supposed to be this town, or do I have the wrong zip code? So she gave me the right information, and I happened to say, and by the way, I got the change in your wiring instructions. And she said, what change? I have never felt more panic in my entire life than that moment. I literally hung up on her, ran over to the other building where our finance team was, just have that wire stopped. Um, Fortunately, well, the wire had already been sent out and it had already been confirmed. As I mentioned, we're up here in Maine. The only saving grace of this entire story was that our little bank that we use here in Maine to process all of those wire transfers used to batch all of the wires at the end of the day. Once they had called all of the customers and confirmed them all, they would send them out in one big group. So we were able to stop that wire from going out before the $2.1 million went to a cyber attacker instead of to my actual seller. So that was the one saving grace of not of wiring $2.1 million, but not actually wiring $2.1 million. And what had happened was there was a business email compromise situation on the real estate broker's part. So these bad actors were lurking in the real estate broker's email for months and months and months. They were looking at all of the transactions that were going on, waiting for the right one to intercept and to change the wiring instructions. So because they were in the broker's account, what they did was took an email that was previously from the sender and they watched all the communication back and forth. They knew about the nickname. They knew all the details of the transaction, you know, the relationship with the husband and his part in the selling process. So they forwarded an email to me from the broker's email that looked like it came from her with the change in the wiring instructions. So one of the most terrifying parts, aside from wiring $2.1 million to a cyber attacker, was I looked at my boss after we were able to stop the wire, and you know he's a partner in the law firm, and I said, what would we have done if that wire went out? And he said, I have no idea. So we had no type of incident response plan. We wouldn't even have known the next steps in what to do. We did end up calling our insurance provider and asking what we should do about the wire that didn't go out. And we were connected with the FBI to report the instance of business email compromise. We had to work with the broker to get everything reported and share all of the details. But it was an absolutely terrifying experience. So one of my big pieces of advice here is if you don't have an incident response plan, the worst time to worry about a fire drill is when everything is on fire. So that was a great takeaway for me. And about 4 weeks later, I saw the co-founder of Defendify give a presentation about cybersecurity. And I just had one of those moments where I was like, I never want another person, another small business owner, another employee to ever feel the way that I felt when I found out that I had wired $2.1 million to a cyber attacker. So that's actually how I ended up over here at Defendify. I hunted Rob down and I said, whatever you're doing, I want to be a part of this. I want to help small businesses harden up their cybersecurity, and I don't want anybody to ever feel that kind of panic again. So fun little story there about how I ended up at Defendify. Hopefully everyone's still awake right now. We're going to jump into our poll question for today's presentation. So I'm going to launch this on your screen. Our poll question is, has your business experienced a cyber attack? So your options here are yes, no, or I'm not sure. So let's see some of those votes coming in there. All right. We've got 100% of our votes in here. So we have, out of all of the votes, we have 25% of you say, yes, my business has experienced a cyber attack. 75% of you say no. I am curious if by the end of this webinar series that changes. You better believe we will be launching that poll again. This is a fun little cartoon here. There are only two types of companies: those that got breached and know it, and those that don't not, or those that are never not breached and know not what they. There's a fun quote that there are two types of companies: those that have been breached and those that just don't know it yet. And this is a fun Charlie Ciso comic strip for people in the IT field. So let's get into some common thoughts around cybersecurity as a small business owner. So one of the things that we hear most often is, I'm a small business owner. I don't think that I am a target for cyber attacks. And as a result of that, don't typically have the kind of protections in place. However, when we look at the actual statistics, 68% of small businesses have experienced a cyber attack in the last 12 months. 50% of all of the attacks out there actually target small businesses. And the reason why is these attackers know that most of the time small businesses don't have the same types of protections that a large enterprise organization does. You guys probably don't have cybersecurity budgets in the millions of dollars. And this is typically what we see. We think it's very interesting to compare digital security to physical security. And I know Craig Systems does a phenomenal job in helping with physical security systems as well as many other services. So if you're a client of theirs, chances are they may have even installed some of these systems in there. If you were protecting your physical building, you would control access to the inside of your building. You might have video surveillance on the outside, you have locks on the doors, you maybe have a card reader in order to get in. You have an alarm system that alerts you to any suspicious activity, maybe an alarm panel with some monitoring, door sensors, motion sensors. If you have any valuable assets, you keep them locked up or in stock rooms or vaults, or you lock up the files. Any data that you're not using anymore, you have a shredding service maybe, and then you have policies and procedures in place. You have an employee handbook that teaches your employees how to be good employees. You do safety training, maybe even have a building inspection, yet the average loss per burglary is only about $2,000. When we look at the digital side of the business, exactly as the same way that you would protect a business physically, you can protect a business digitally. You can control access to the data through a firewall. You can have an alarm system on your network that alerts you if there's any suspicious activity going on. You can secure your digital assets. You can encrypt your data while it's at rest. You can store, and as it's moving, you can do backups to make sure that you never lose that data. You have policies and procedures in place, an incident response plan. As I mentioned, we didn't have a technology and data use policy that shows employees how to use technology, and you can do training for the team and scanning and testing. And the average loss from a data breach for a small business, this does not talk about the big enterprise businesses, but for a small business, the average loss from a data breach is $120,000. Yet, most of the small businesses that we talk to look like this. They have a firewall in place, and that's the little box that sits between the internet connection and the rest of your network. And they have antivirus on their PCs, and that's usually about it. Another concern that we hear a lot, or hesitation, is companies say to us all the time, well, I don't store credit card data, so I don't really have to worry about that. All organizations have sensitive data. So credit card data is obviously the first one that comes to mind for a lot of people, but you also store a lot of personally identifiable information on your employees, on your clients, anybody that you're doing business with. You also have company IP and trade secrets. We worked with a company that produces food, and when we were sitting down and talking to them about cybersecurity, we said, what is one piece of information that you really want to protect? And they said, our recipes. If anybody got our recipes, they could copy our food, and that would be disastrous for us. You have a lot of tax documents, and we see this every January. We start to see a lot of W-2 scams going around, asking for copies of employees' tax documents. You have bank information or wire transfer details for yourself, for vendors, for other companies that you work with. You also have vendor agreements and price lists that you may want to keep confidential, legal documents, contracts. There's a lot of different types of sensitive data, as well as customer sensitive data. I've really been working a lot with some law firms in the Boston area, and they have a lot of sensitive information about their clients and ongoing court cases that they really need to be able to protect. Is there anything else you can think of that would be considered sensitive data and would need to be protected based on your own organization? There's a little chat box there in the Zoom window, so if you can think of any other type of information that you store that you would need to protect, go ahead and throw that down there in the chat box. So when we talk about these bad actors, we want to talk about who they are and why they're coming after you. So we've established that they are 50% of data breaches are targeted towards small businesses. So who are the people behind these attacks? In the top left, we have cyber criminals who are causing their crimes to make money. In the top right, we have hacktivists. Anonymous from back in the day is a great example, and they're causing their crimes because either they don't like a company or their political stances, or something that's going on in current events. In the bottom left, we have cyber soldiers. So these are nation state actors that are causing their crimes against either the United States or public or private companies. And no doubt we're doing the same thing in a defensive nature to other countries. There's been a lot of information lately about these types of cyber attacks. And then in the bottom right, we have our insider threat. Does anybody recognize this guy from the movies? If you think you know who he is, go ahead and throw that in the chat box there. An insider threat is an employee, a contractor, an ex-employee, or an ex-contractor who has or had valid access to the network and the data. Sometimes their actions could be malicious, as in the case of this picture. Sometimes they just do things on accident. So it could be as simple as, I'm going to send out an email and I want to send it to Mike at Craig Systems. I start typing MIK and I hit enter and I fire off an email with sensitive information, but I've just sent it to the wrong Mike because I was moving too quickly. So it can be as simple as that to have an insider threat data breach. Anybody recognize that guy? That is the gentleman from Jurassic Park who tried to steal the dinosaur DNA and sell it. So one of the common concerns that we hear is that I don't have any information that an attacker would want. So maybe you're not, a company that Anonymous would go after. You don't take any political stances. You don't have any information that could be used in cyber warfare. We mentioned originally that there are cyber criminals that are causing their crimes to make money. This gives you a good idea of what the data sells for in the dark web. So a social security number goes for about $1. A non-financial login, like maybe a social media account, email, for $1. Financial logins go from anywhere from $20 to $200. That could be, bank accounts, investment accounts, anything like that. A credit card with CVV, that 3-digit number on the back, $5. A lot of people say to us, that sounds a little bit low. And that's mainly because the credit card companies do such a great job nowadays of stopping any fraud attempts while they're in action. But a credit card with FULS info comes with a lot more information. It'll have, the billing address, maybe mother's maiden name, maybe some security question answers there, and that fetches a little bit more money. The biggest one that we always see, medical records, continues to top the charts. We see those go up to $1,000 for a lot of different reasons. Your medical records include all of that basic personally identifiable information. Also, a lot of times they have your social security number, your insurance information, so it can be used to commit medical insurance fraud. But also we've seen really interesting situations where there's been extortion of a CEO of a company who has an undisclosed medical condition and doesn't want anybody in the company to find out about it. And then, the attackers are able to obtain those medical records and use that as leverage against that CEO. So it's word of advice there. If you store medical records, you really are a prime target, which is why we have regulations in place such as HIPAA. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the hacker tactics. I know a lot of the sessions that we're doing for this Lunch and Learn ongoing series, we're going to really dive into a lot of these. Social engineering is one of my favorite topics. We are going to talk about everything phishing related, phishing, vishing, smishing, text messages, how information that you put out there on social media and your marketing teams can be used against you. This is one of my favorite sessions that we do, so don't miss that one. Another hacker tactic is a man-in-the-middle Wi-Fi attack. We have ransomware in the top right, and in a second here, I think Mike's going to jump in and talk about a local ransomware attack. Also, compromised credentials is another hacker tactic. Credential stuffing. They're able to obtain those login details on the dark web, and it may be a site that you haven't used in a really long time, but they use that to be able to gain access to what I call the keys to the castle. And then our last image down there, we have the insider threat. So we're going to dive into all of these in their own individual sessions, but Mike, you want to jump in and share some of those details about that local cyber incident?
Sure. Thank you, Shanna. So I'm sure that the local people are well aware that Samaritan Medical Center was hit with a ransomware attack this weekend. They currently have the FBI in there, as well as some forensics people investigating the attack to try and determine where it came from. I don't know what the amount of the ransom that's been requested to be paid in Bitcoin is, but I'm sure it's pretty high. And hopefully Samaritan does not pay that ransom, because a lot of times companies will pay the ransom, and what ends up happening is they pay the ransom, they'll either get no data back, they get some of their data back, or they get all their data back, only to find out that maybe 3-4 days later, they get attacked again by the same company with another request for money. So that's why you oftentimes hear people say, don't pay the ransom, because if you don't know where the holes are and you don't know how to fix them, or you haven't fixed them, the chances of you getting attacked again are pretty high. And that brings to light a few months ago, Watertown Daily Times here in Watertown got hit with a ransomware attack. They, on their server, they took everything down, put their server back up. 3 days later, they got hit with the same ransomware attack again, took it down, thought they'd cleaned it again, got everything going, got hit a third time. That time they took everything down, replaced everything. So it can be pretty expensive to not only if you pay the ransom, but in the loss in revenue, as well as the cost of replacing all the equipment, software, and processes and procedures that need to be implemented as far as resolving this whole thing. So ransomware is out there. It's on the forefront today. That's one of the big things that's come back again. So I just wanted to make everybody aware of a couple local ones that we've had. That doesn't include other other businesses that I know of that were hit within the last couple of years here in our region. So I just want to make everybody aware of that. Shanna, I'll turn it back over to you.
Yeah, we're going to have a whole deep dive into ransomware, and we'll talk about the Baltimore attacks, and cities and municipalities and hospitals, and how those ransomware attacks are happening. So that's going to be another lunch and learn session. So hopefully you'll join us for that. We're going to do a deep dive into. I love all these things. It makes me so happy. So another question that we hear a lot is, I have antivirus and a firewall. Isn't that enough? So it was for a long time. We know that having antivirus systems on your computer is really important, but we get asked all the time, why isn't that enough? So this is a huge challenge because cyber attackers are altering and editing that malware so frequently that it's really difficult for antivirus companies to keep up. The way that traditional antivirus software systems work is it goes up into the cloud and it gets all of the new malware that's been detected by the antivirus company. It's got this big dictionary of all known samples, brings it down to your computer, and it says, like, this is the malware that we are aware of. So when you're opening attachments or files, or when going to websites, the antivirus says, if you see any of these pop up on the computer, we want you to block it. But the problem with that is that there are 4 to 5 new malware samples being made every single second. So it's virtually impossible for those antivirus companies to keep up with this speed, and the attackers know that. They go in and just change that code just a little bit so that that traditional antivirus doesn't detect it anymore. And they know that they can deploy that new strain of malware, send it to somebody, people interact with it. Before that dictionary can catch up, they're going to be able to get more people infected. By the time we're out of this lunch and learn, there will be over 7,000 new malware samples. By the end of your workday, 125,000 new malware samples. And between now and the same time tomorrow, 350,000 new malware samples. So you can see the statistic down there on the bottom that there are over 1 billion known malware samples. Terrifying. This is a great visual that I really like. This shows what antivirus is and what it does. So antivirus protects devices against known infections. Firewalls protect networks against unauthorized access. The Defendify platform protects on multiple layers. We have foundation, culture, technology. This is a really brief snapshot of all the different modules that are included in that all-in-one platform. So it shows that it's kind of that next step in a growing and expanding cybersecurity program. One of the things that we really see a lot that drives companies into a cybersecurity program is that they've been receiving a lot of third-party cybersecurity assessments. When we look at large data breaches, Target, Equifax, Home Depot, Marriott, these were all caused by third parties. The large companies are starting to realize this, so they're slapping smaller companies with these cybersecurity assessments. They're at risk of losing the contracts or losing that client if they can't pass these assessments, because they know a lot of risk comes from their vendors. A lot of these have hundreds of questions, take hours to complete. I just gave you a little sample here of some of the questions that we've seen in these cybersecurity assessments. Talking about incident responses, penetration testing. Do you have cyber insurance? Do you train your employees regularly? Do you do criminal background checks? Outline technology solutions that you currently have in place. A lot of people, as soon as they start getting in here and they see things like these acronyms, are like, I don't even know what this means, and I have to have all of these things in place. So that then leads them to the next question we hear a lot is, well, where do I even start? And we want you to think about the way that you are looking at cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is not something that you do once. You install a particular technology or you do an assessment, and then you're good for a while. It's not a project. It's an ongoing posture that everybody in your organization needs to take from top to bottom, and it needs to be on the forefront of everybody's mind every day. And you need to have multiple layers. Technology alone is not a solution. You could probably imagine these large enterprise companies that have breaches. They have all the technology solutions in the world, but they still have these incidents. You also have a culture of employee knowledge. You've got to have a foundation of policies, procedures, and plans. And to get you started, our friends over at Craig Systems have a cybersecurity essentials package that is completely free. It includes 3 modules. So if this is something that you are interested in getting, maybe you're attending these sessions to learn a little bit more about cybersecurity topics. We'll mention this on every session, but it is a free package that is available. So if you're interested, you can send an email over to sales@craigsystems.com for more information. That includes an assessment that will quickly show you where you stand, where you have holes, where you can harden, and give you some recommendations on how to do that. Some vulnerability scanning that will let you know if there are any holes or weaknesses in your network and that you can begin hardening up. And also send some threat notifications to keep you up to date on emerging scams and threats and other types of cybersecurity topics that could impact your business. And so this is our very first kickoff session about just kind of the general W's who need cybersecurity anyway. Our upcoming topics I've got listed here. Every Thursday at 12:30 Eastern, we're going to do this quick lunch and learn. So grab your best PB&J or the leftovers from your fridge, and we're going to start diving into some of these topics. Social engineering attacks and social media is one of my favorite. We're going to talk about password health and multi-factor authentication, vulnerability scanning, those patch notifications that you probably snooze all the time, ransomware, compliance. So if you're in one of those fields where you have to worry about those types of things, go ahead and join us for that one. We'll be diving into the nitty-gritty of those compliance frameworks. Annual cybersecurity training versus ongoing awareness. We're going to talk all about that. And then the less sexy stuff, the policies and the procedures and the plans and the things that are also extremely important to have in. So that is every Thursday at 12:30. If you've registered for this session, you don't have to re-register for all of the other ones. You can just join us every single week. And then if you have any questions, or if you want to get your hands on those 3 free no strings attached tools, there is the email and phone number for the folks over at Craig Systems. They'd be happy to get you set up with that free cybersecurity platform. So it is 1 o'clock, end of our lunch break. Any questions, go ahead and throw them down in the chat. But I just want to thank you all for attending today. And that's it for me. We'll see you next week. Phishing and social engineering.